You should always stick around for one more drink. That's when things happen. That's when you find out everything you want to know. You mustn't be taken in by the moonlight and the magnolias. There's more to Savannah than all that. Things around here can get very murky. To understand the living, you have to commune with the dead. The half hour before midnight is for doing good. The half hour after midnight is for doing evil. Seems like we need a little bit of both tonight. Welcome to the Southern Blueprint Podcast. Today we are unraveling the story that puts Savannah on the map. For all you mystery lovers and seekers of the strange, this one is for you. We are talking about Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. When I first started the Southern Blueprint, looking at it as a concept, this book, this movie, this story was basically the prime example of what I wanted the Southern Blueprint to be about. A cornerstone, if you will, of the type of content that I wanted to discuss and put out. So I am very excited to do this episode. We will explore this best-selling book that brought this tale to life, the true crime saga that kept the city in suspense, the chilling legends of the Mercer-Williams House, and the film that immortalized it all. Whether you're here for history, the scandal, or maybe even here for the supernatural, you're in for a wild ride through one of Savannah's most fantastic stories. So grab your sweet tea or something a little stronger, and let's dive into a world where Southern charm meets mystery and murder. I'm not gonna lie, I almost wanted to start this whole episode off by simply saying there was a murder in Savannah and just talk like that the whole time. Fans of The Office will know exactly what I'm talking about, but I digress. Let's talk about Savannah. I'm not going to do that accent. Savannah is known for its Spanish moss-draped oak trees, cobblestone streets, stately mansions. It's one of the oldest cities in the South, founded in 1733. It is a truly beautiful city and one of my favorite places to visit. But what really sets Savannah apart is its reputation as a city of secrets. You got ghost stories, you got all these eccentric characters, and a touch of decadence. Make it the perfect setting for the tale we're about to unravel. Now, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil is a book written by John Barrett and published in 1994. It's part true crime, part travelogue, and part social commentary, all wrapped in the mystique of Savannah. Author John Barrett was born in 1939. He grew up in Syracuse, New York. He attended Harvard University. He wrote and edited for the Harvard Lampoon. He was an associate editor at Esquire and editor at New York Magazine before he moved to Savannah in 1985. Barrett spent several years living in Savannah, embedding himself in social circles and collecting stories. The result of this is a vivid tapestry of the city and its residents, from the flamboyant drag queen Lady Chablis to the mysterious voodoo priestess Minerva. At the heart, though, the book revolves around a murder, the 1981 killing of Danny Hansford, who was a young, troubled, quote-unquote assistant to the wealthy antique dealer Jim Williams. It was rumored, or maybe not even a rumor, it was pretty well known, that these two had a sexual relationship, which we will get into a little bit later, but I first want to talk about the book itself and how it came about. Back in January of 2024, John Barrett sat down with Garden and Gun magazine to do an interview since it had been 30 years since the book came out. And John had this to say about the process of the book. He said, Random House sent the manuscript to various news outlets, and one was Good Morning America. The person who read it loved it and said, we want to do a tour of Savannah with John Barrett. They decided I would be a guest host in Savannah, and not for just like a 5-minute segment. They would do 20 minutes. After that, the book hit the bestseller list, and it kind of snowballed after that. John said, I went from an unknown author to one thing leading to another, and it was just a total surprise. He said, I didn't have an advance on the book or show it to anyone while I was working on it. When it was done, I took it to my agent, and she read it, and she said it was, quote unquote, too local. John then said, I didn't argue, but I'm glad in retrospect that she turned it down, because I got a new agent, took it to 5 publishers. Every one of them wanted it, and we had a bidding war. So there you go. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil spent a staggering 216 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, and is often credited with literally sparking Savannah's tourism boom. You can't really talk about the book either without mentioning the book cover. It's one of the most iconic images tied to this whole tale, and that is the Bird Girl statue. If you've seen the book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, just look it up. The statue was originally sculpted in 1936 by Sylvia Saul Judson. This bronze figure was just another grave marker standing quietly in Savannah's Bonaventure Cemetery. That is until it became the cover of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. The statue is it's very serene, but she has this mysterious expression. She's holding 2 bowls out that kind of look like they could carry water or maybe judgment. It made for a perfect symbol for the book's themes of duality and mystery. After the book's release, the Bird Girl became so famous that crowds were flocking to Bonaventure Cemetery just to see the statue. And it was disrupting kind of the quiet atmosphere of the cemetery. So to preserve the sanctity of the cemetery, the statue was actually relocated to Savannah's Telfair Museums, where she now stands, and you can go visit. It's a lovely statue. Definitely go check it out if you're ever in Savannah. The funny thing is, I think the very first time I went to Savannah, I went to the cemetery to try to look for this statue, and then realized that it was actually moved to a museum. But let's talk about the actual murder. Sorry, I did say I wasn't going to do that. So the book does focus on antique dealer Jim Williams, who was accused of murdering Danny Hansford on May 2nd, 1981. So Jim was renowned for his restoration of historic properties. He purchased the Mercer House, and you'll hear me say either Mercer House or the Mercer-Williams House, which is what it's known as now. But back then, when he purchased it, it was called the Mercer House. He got that back in 1969. It's a beautiful home, and you can actually tour the house today. They don't actually like to focus or talk too much about the murder, but there's no surprise to anyone why, like 90% of the people are there to visit. But I digress. Jim Williams would hold these lavish annual Christmas parties at his home on the eve of the Cotillions Debutante Ball, which is very Southern in Savannah. It was like the highlight of everyone's social calendars. Williams also had this kind of like inbox and outbox for his invitations, depending on whether or not the person was like in Jim Williams's favor at the time. If he liked you, you were in. If not, you were out, and he would kind of move you back and forth, I guess, depending if you made him mad or anything like that. But we'll talk about the relationship between Jim and Danny here. It all began, Hansford was employed by Williams initially in a professional capacity. Like I said, he was kind of like an assistant. He would do things around the house. But over time, their association evolved into a personal and intimate relationship with Hansford residing at the Mercer-Williams house for like 2 years. He stayed there for 2 years. Their relationship was characterized by frequent arguments and volatility, reflecting kind of Hansford's unpredictable behavior and Williams's complex, personality. It was said that Hansford was kind of a young hothead, maybe into drugs and things like that. But kind of a volatile situation. The night that kind of everything changed, again, May 2nd, 1981, the police were called to the Mercer-Williams house, where inside they found Danny Hansford dead from a gunshot wound. Jim Williams claimed that Hansford, in a fit of rage, overturned a 18th century English grandfather clock and later threatened Jim with a gun. He said that Hansford actually tried to shoot him, but the gun misfired. In response, Jim Williams said that he retrieved his 9mm Luger pistol from his desk and shot Hansford in self-defense. However, prosecutors would contend that Williams staged the crime scene to appear as though Hansford had fired at him first. There was definitely some inconsistencies with Jim's first account of things. The complexities of their relationship, marked by both professional and personal entanglements, became a focal point during the following legal proceedings. Jim Williams faced 4 trials over the course of 8 years. The first coming in 1982, Jim's defense attorney, Bobby Lee Cook, argued, just like Jim had claimed, that he acted in self-defense. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting that Williams had staged the crime scene to appear like it was self-defense. They claimed that investigators observed that Hansford's right hand was positioned over the pistol, yet there was no blood near his hand, despite significant blood elsewhere. Basically, they were suggesting the gun may have been placed under Hansford's hands post-mortem. Hansford, he's laying on the floor, and they were saying that Jim had put the pistol underneath his hand to make it look like he had fired. The only problem is they did forensic testing, and it revealed that there was no gunpowder residue on his hands, implying that he had not discharged a firearm, which contradicted the whole self-defense claim. After all of the presentation of evidence and closing arguments, the jury deliberated for a few hours, and they came back and returned a guilty verdict. Jim Williams was thereafter sentenced to life in prison. This conviction was appealed. The Georgia Supreme Court overturned the conviction in January of 1983, citing procedural errors, including inconsistencies in police testimony. There was something regarding a bullet hole in the floor of the Mercer house, just a huge mess. And so that conviction was overturned. So this leads us to the second trial, which happened in September 1983. This retrial was held in Savannah, but it introduced notable changes in the defense strategy and the whole courtroom dynamics. Sonny Sealer, a prominent Savannah attorney, assumed Jim Williams's defense. Unlike the first trial, where Jim's homosexuality was not openly discussed, Sealer, the new attorney, chose to address it directly. This approach aimed to present a transparent narrative and kind of counteract any potential biases. For the prosecution, District Attorney Spencer Lawton continued to lead things, and still maintaining that Williams, had staged the crime scene to appear like this was all in self-defense. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting inconsistencies with Jim's account, and still emphasized the whole forensic findings, the gunpowder residue or the lack thereof. To support their argument, the prosecution called witnesses, including law enforcement officers and forensic experts, to testify about the crime scene and the autopsy results. Jim Williams this time testified in his own defense, providing his own account of things. He didn't do that in the first trial, but they decided to do that in this one. The defense also called character witnesses to attest to Jim Williams's reputation and credibility. After deliberations, the jury returned yet again a guilty verdict, again resulting in life imprisonment for Jim Williams. This verdict was again appealed, and in June 1985, the Georgia Supreme Court overturned this second conviction. The court cited issues such as improper admission of particular testimonies and some misconduct during closing arguments. So this led to Jim's third trial. So for the third trial, which happened in the spring of 1987, this trial also introduced significant new evidence and was marked by notable courtroom events. Prior to the trial, defense attorney Sonny Sealer subpoenaed records from the hospital where Hansford's body was taken. These records suggested that Hansford's hands were not bagged at the crime scene, which that's a standard procedure to preserve, gunshot residue. The defense argued that the absence of bagging could have led to the loss of crucial evidence, potentially affecting the determination of whether Hansford had actually fired a weapon. You also had witness testimony. A nurse from the hospital testified that she received a call from the medical examiner instructing her to bag Hansford's hands after the body had arrived at the hospital. She complied by placing plastic garbage can liners over his hands. An expert witness for the defense testified that the use of those plastic bags could create moisture, potentially washing away any existing gunshot residue. During deliberations, it was reported that a juror actually contacted a paramedic to inquire about medical information related to the case. Although this incident couldn't be conclusively proven, it did raise concerns about the integrity of the whole deliberation process. After, the jury, they deliberated for a long time. They remained deadlocked. 11 jurors favoring a guilty verdict, and one juror who was steadfast in believing in Williams's innocence. This impasse led to Judge George Oliver to declare a mistrial. So now, here we are, May 1989, and Jim Williams is now facing his fourth trial for the murder of Danny Hansford. For this trial, there was a change in venue. It was moved from Savannah to Augusta. Attorney Sonny Sealer, he's still with Jim, and he's still emphasizing the inconsistencies of the prosecution. They're still saying and claiming self-defense. And they also kind of doubled down on Danny's violent behavior, his drug use, and kind of, was trying to paint a picture of a troubled young man. They also tried to, what we talked about a little bit ago was, the inconsistencies in the handling of the crime scene, and then properly trying to bag Hansford's hands, the whole thing with the nurse and wrapping things in plastic, garbage can liners. There was also numerous character witnesses called to testify about one, Hansford volatile behavior, and also, character witnesses for Jim Williams and how amazing and wonderful he is. After a brief deliberation, this time the jury acquitted Williams of all charges. This verdict concluded a long legal saga, marking the first time in Georgia's history that an individual was tried 4 times for the same crime. Now, I have to bring up someone, and she's an actual person and someone that Jim Williams actually sought out while all of his trials are going on. And that is Valerie Bowles, who was a root doctor, which basically means she specialized in hoodoo. I don't know the difference between hoodoo and voodoo. I'm sure someone can tell me, but anyway, regardless, in the book, John Barrett, he renames her and gives her the name Minerva. Minerva, or Valerie Bowles, whatever you want to call her, would conduct these rituals for Jim, often in Savannah's Bonaventure Cemetery, aiming to protect Jim Williams and influence the trial's outcome. One of these rituals that the author, John Barrett, describes in the book, involves, Minerva going to the cemetery and going to Danny's grave and calling upon his spirit and asking him to hush and not interfere with the living. This act was not meant to harm Danny's spirit, but to ensure that it would not disturb the living world or the legal proceedings. Minerva's rituals would often incorporate symbolic objects, including, graveyard dirt, candles, personal belongings to the deceased. She believed that performing these ceremonies, she could appease restless spirits and sway the outcome of earthly events. Her rituals became like a fascination with Jim Williams, and like I was saying, he would search her out and he would have her conduct these rituals on his behalf. So 8 months after the acquittal in his fourth trial for the murder of Danny Hansford, on January 14th, 1990, something rather odd happens. Jim Williams dies unexpectedly in his study in the same location where Danny Hansford was killed. Jim was 59 years old. The official cause of death was pneumonia and heart failure. Now, I've read quite a bit about this story online, and there has been a rumor that Minerva, Valerie Bowles, whatever you want to call her, got into an argument with Jim, and she got upset and left, and then shortly after that is when this happens. Regardless of any of that, it is still very, very strange that Jim dies basically near where Danny Hansford was killed. After that, Jim Williams' sister, Dorothy, she inherited the Mercer-Williams house and put it up for sale about a decade later with a price tag of just under $9 million, which was later, I think, reduced to about $7 million. Dorothy died in 2023 at the age of 88. Her daughter and Williams's niece now owns the house, and like I said, you can go tour it. But now let's move from the book to the movie. You've got this true crime saga that actually happened. You have the book that was wildly popular, 216 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. So, of course, this book ends up getting adapted into a movie. It is directed by Clint Eastwood, made in 1997. The film starred Kevin Spacey as Jim Williams. Jude Law plays Danny Hansford, and for whatever reason, Danny Hansford is renamed Billy Hanson. And then you have John Cusack, who plays the author, John Barrett. And that character is renamed to John Kelso. Also, Clint Eastwood's daughter, Allison, she plays Mandy Nichols, who is a romantic interest of John Cusack's character, which I thought was pretty interesting. The film itself received mixed reviews. While it captured the book's quirky characters and, lush settings, everything was filmed in Savannah, in the real places. Some critics still felt it lacked the book's depth and charm. One highlight, though, was the performance of Lady Chablis, who played herself in the film. Lady Chablis is a real person who is a trailblazing transgender performer, author, and entertainer, and she brought humor and kind of this authenticity to the story, stealing nearly every scene that she was in. She's pretty fantastic. If you have not seen the movie, definitely, first read the book, but then definitely watch the movie too. Her role in the book offered kind of like a glimpse into Savannah's vibrant nightlife during the 1980s and 1990s. She performed at Club One, which is a popular nightclub in Savannah that became synonymous with her name. Unlike many of the book's figures, Lady Chablis was not connected to the Jim Williams trial or the events at Mercer-Williams House. Instead, she served as a kind of like a symbol of Savannah's quirkiness and openness. Another fun fact about the movie is Sonny Sealer, who was Jim Williams' actual attorney in real life. He was cast as Judge Samuel L. White, presiding judge in the film's trial scenes, which I think is kind of crazy. Initially, Sonny was just considered for a role as a juror, but he was persuaded by Eastwood to take on this more substantial part of the judge. So it's just crazy that Jim's actual attorney ends up being the judge in the movie. Like I kind of mentioned, while the Mercer-Williams House exteriors were prominently featured in the movie, interior scenes, especially those depicting the unpleasantness of the murder, were filmed on sets, to kind of respect the wishes of the current owner, who was Dorothy at the time. So I could see why they don't want to like reenact a murder scene in their own house. But a lot of the stuff, like I said, was filmed outside, so you can get to see the house. And there were some shots inside that were filmed too. Uga makes a cameo in this movie. If you don't know who Uga is, that is the University of Georgia's beloved bulldog mascot. Director Clint Eastwood personally invited Uga to appear, adding a touch of local flair to the movie. Another fun fact, and I didn't know this until this week, I was looking at some details and fun facts and things like that. Casting choices. Edward Norton was initially considered to be the lead role of John Kelso, but declined the part, which eventually went to John Cusack. One of the funny things I've read about this movie, there was a 2015 interview with the author John Barrett, and he said that Kevin Spacey played Jim Williams really badly. He said he didn't even come close to capturing. John said that he had offered Kevin Spacey recordings of, Jim Williams talking to the author, telling him stories about the Mercer-Williams House and all these things. He had, John had all these tapes, and he was like, I was going to give them to Kevin Spacey so he could listen to them and, get the voice right. Kevin Spacey said that he had already heard Williams on tape talking during one of his trials. So when John ends up seeing the movie, he's kind of like perplexed by the way Kevin Spacey is talking like Jim Williams, because he felt like Kevin Spacey was talking like he was like in a fog or like sleepwalking, or like he was like half asleep. And if you watch the movies, there is kind of like this funny like there was a murder in Savannah. So like it's but what John thinks happens is, and he thinks it's pretty funny, he believes that Kevin Spacey listened to tapes of Jim Williams during the third trial, and during that trial, Jim Williams was taking a bunch of Valium, so he's like kind of like slurring his words, and so like that just cracks me up because he's just the one time he listens to him, he's super messed up and on Valium and everything like that. So I thought that was pretty humorous. The budget for this movie was $30 million. It did not make its money back. The box office gross was $25.1 million domestically. So despite kind of high expectations due to the popularity of the book, the film did not perform as well as anticipated, falling short of recouping its production budget during its theatrical run. While it attracted fans of the book and those interested in like Southern Gothic storytelling, the slower pacing and kind of character-driven narrative may have limited its broader commercial appeal. Like I said, critically, the film received mixed reviews, some praise this atmospheric portrayal of Savannah, which is nice, and I agree to that. There were some standout performances. Kevin Spacey's actually not bad in this movie. His accent is very close to House of Cards, if you've seen that. A little over the top. And again, Lady Chablis is great in this one. But however, some critics felt that it just lacked some of the stuff that was great from the book. I absolutely love the book. The movie to me is not that bad. It's such an interesting story. And the thing too, because of the movie adaptation, there were 4 trials in the book and in real life. But in the movie, they just do the one trial. They kind of like condense it down, of course, because it's a movie. So something just to watch out there for. But if you've never read the book, you absolutely have to do that. I've written a book review on it. It's one of my favorite. Like I said at the beginning of the show, it's one of the reasons why one of the kind of guiding principles behind the Southern Blueprint. Now, having a murder happen in your home is creepy enough. And then you have, the owner dying basically 8 months later in the almost same exact spot as where Danny dies. And then you have Minerva with the hoodoo voodoo thing. It's all very weird. Savannah is just weird in general and has a bazillion ghost stories. But some other weird shit has happened in this house. So in 1969, the house is at that point empty. Now, this house has gone through different owners and all types of crazy history with that. I did an article about this. It's on the website, thesouthernblueprint.com. You can read all about it. I've done a lot of material on Midnight of Good and Evil. But anyway, so at this time, in 1969, the house is vacant. 11-year-old Tommy Downs goes into this house, and there are varying accounts of all this. But basically, one thing is completely true. Tommy gets up on the roof, don't know why, and then he falls to his death, tragically impaling himself on the iron fence. Those iron fences that are around homes that have they're super sharp. Yeah, he falls off a roof and impales himself. It's just weird, man. And if you ever do a ghost tour in Savannah, you're definitely going to stop by the Mercer-Williams House. I've done a ghost tour, absolutely stopped by there, talked a little bit about the murder that happened there, and then also to young Tommy falling to his death. It's just a weird thing, just where stuff keeps happening in and around this house. So yeah, it just adds another kind of strange layer to this whole tale. And the thing is, if this was a fiction book and a fiction movie, it would still be awesome. But the crazy shit thing is, all of this is true. The crazy thing about this Tommy Downs story and the fact that this book was written and it was so popular, and then you have the movie, Savannah, like I mentioned before, this puts Savannah on the map. If you've been to Savannah in the past 20, 25 years, it is because of this book. And I'm not kidding. That's not hyperbole. It has a direct correlation of Savannah's tourism. in Savannah. They call it The Book. It's not called Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. It's called The Book. Like I said a couple times now, this book, this movie, this whole situation is one of the reasons why I wanted to do the Southern Blueprint in the first place. It just has all of the components that I love. It's got true crime. It's got this sense of like supernatural. I absolutely love Savannah. One of my favorite places. What you should do is you should read the book. You should watch the movie, and then you should book a trip to Savannah. You should go to the cemetery. You should go see the Bird Girl statue in the museum. Savannah has great food. You should also do the ghost tour. You should also tour the Mercer-Williams House. You should do all of those things, and you'll thank me later. Thank you guys again for listening to the show. I took a little bit of break over the Christmas holiday. I want to start getting back into a more better cadence of these, trying to get these out, like twice a month. But thank you guys for tuning in, listening in. Got some great feedback, and hopefully I can make these even better and better. So if you have ideas for shows or ways I can make this better, please let me know. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you see this on YouTube, follow there as well too. And guys, thank you so much, and see you next time.